By now, you know Cyberpunk 2077 was a farce. A game that promised so much, yet lived up to none of it. The supposed future of RPGs that turned out to be a broken mess. But is that really your opinion? Or is that the one you formed off the backs of others? And were those opinions crafted through experience or out of necessity? Too quick in our modern era, we jump to conclusions, whether it be politics, relationships, or even gaming. What if I told you everything you thought you knew about Cyberpunk 2077 and its release was a lie?
Cyberpunk 2077 is an ugly, unplayable mess.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Playing the game, I had to refund it because I just was not having any fun.
I really do wish the game didn't
enjoying
release
the
the
game,
Street
and I don't
Samurai
really
is
feel like the
overshadowing how
glitches
bad.
and bugs.
How does it feel, CD Projekt Red fanboys, to be a part of the Losers Club?
This is a hard video to make. Because of the hate, anger, and vitriol surrounding this game, it's impossible to truthfully talk about it. You see, I'm not here to tell you whether you should or should not love Cyberpunk 2077. That's for you to decide. But I am here because as someone that does love this game, it's important that we're honest at the very least. I played this game on release, on new gen consoles, old gen, and PC. I know firsthand that it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. But that's my personal experience. You may genuinely have the opposite. What isn't subjective, though, is the lies. Not the lies that we were told about over and over again, but the lies of missing promises and guarantees, of bad game design, and of a developer who has supposedly lost their way. Here's an example. Back in 2020, before the game was actually released, there was a German podcast behind a paywall that came out interviewing some of the developers making Cyberpunk 2077. One of the listeners checked out the podcast and article on GameStar and helped get this information out to everyone else who didn't speak German or didn't have access to read or listen. He made this post on Reddit, and lo and behold, it blew up on the Cyberpunk subreddit. This was when the hype was at a fever pitch. Fans were scrounging for any sort of information they could get on the game, and well, this Reddit post provided that. But you see, here's the issue. A lot of claims of what the developers had said in this article turned out to not be true. The Reddit user had mistranslated multiple things that were said and was giving across information that was completely false. He noted that thousands of NPCs had daily routines. That was a mistranslation. He explained how the developers said cyberspace in Cyberpunk would be, which also turned out to be completely false. And how do I know this? Well, don't take my word for it. Take the developer that actually did the interview commenting on the post and saying it was all wrong. But no one in the community talked about that, did they? It's comical now looking back on this exchange because it shows just how misguided the fan base was becoming. There were people in this comment section literally arguing with the developers themselves about what was in the game and what they said. If that doesn't show you how out of hand this got, I don't know what will. And to top this off, other mainstream media sites picked up this information and spread it around. A random post from a random Reddit user trying to do some good actually resulted in so much harm. So many people that have been trashing Cyberpunk at its initial release, and even to this day, in many ways, honestly, have no idea what they're talking about. And it's perfectly okay to be mad at CD Projekt Red and for this game. That is justified. But acting like you personally heard all these promises and were let down, in most cases, is a lie if you're honest with yourself. So much of the supposed missing features and broken promises were never features or promises in the first place, but rather shoddy journalism and a propensity we have as humans to just believe whatever we're told. It's funny, for this video I've gone back and watched so many other videos about the release of this game, and almost all of them use articles like this one to explain why this game was a letdown. But what they didn't get is that they all just fell for the same fake hype cycles as well, of things that, while CDPR certainly didn't handle well, they almost certainly did not actually promise either. And there's a lot more cases like this. Let's take a look at the initial gameplay reveal that at the time had so many people claiming this was the next step of RPGs. For anyone that doesn't know, this demo was initially given to the press behind the scenes and it was raved about, eventually leading to its release to the public on YouTube, where people had endless discussions about how great the game looked. Well, instead of listening to everyone online that said the demo was a lie after this game came out, let's learn from our last example and actually take a look at it for ourselves. The demo starts with us creating a new character. The UI looks a lot different than it does in the base game, but in general, the faces and color changes are the same as what we ended up getting. What is different is the background checks, where we decide our backstory, key life events, and history. This was not in the base game, but for anyone arguing that this is cut content, I would actually argue that what we did get, the life path system, is even better, as it lets us have an actual intro into who we are that changes dialogue later in the game, rather than just selecting a button at the start of the screen. After that, we were thrown into Night City for the first time and watch V and Jackie take on the Sandra Dorset mission. The mission is essentially exactly the same as the retail version, except for a little bit different looking UI. Otherwise though, the environmental destruction, Jackie tackling the boss, and Trauma Team coming in are all things that can or do happen, contrary to what we were told by people saying it was all a lie. Other than that, in the base game, the graphics actually got an upgrade, something else no one seems to want to talk about since only being negative about this game is popular. Now though, we do actually start to see some downgrades. For example, when you first walk out of your mega building, in the gameplay reveal, there is a massive sea of people. But in the actual retail game, it's a substantially lower amount of NPCs, especially on previous gen consoles. Once again though, what no one is talking about is the PC version of Cyberpunk with max settings actually got really close to this vision, even on release. Hell, here's a clip of walking through the game on PC on release to give you an idea of how crowded the game actually was. It's a great example of where CDPR did not set expectations well, but to argue that they outright lied would be absurd. We knew that they were showing us top-level PC gameplay in that original trailer. They even said so. And as the gameplay goes on, we see more and more slight differences in the game. For example, at Victor's Clinic, we choose our augmentations on the screen instead of what we actually got in the base game, just a UI. But this is another great example of the misguided outrage. A lot of people got mad at this because it wasn't what we got in the game. But really think about it. Would you rather have this, selecting each upgrade one by one and taking forever to scroll to the side, or this, where we have access to everything we need on one screen to get what we need done and get out quick? People are mad at Cyberpunk because it is a little different than what was shown. But not a lot of people are stopping and asking themselves, is it actually better now? The demo ends with the infiltrating of the Maelstrom hideout, another mission that made it into the base game, and another mission that stays almost exactly the same as what we now have in the game. The only remaining big differences from the demo were how hacking worked and climbing on walls with mantis blades. We will touch on mantis blades later, but for hacking, the minigame we saw is once again a perfect example of fans blowing things out of proportion. Did the animation we saw in the original gameplay trailer look cool? Yeah, I think it looks way cooler than what we actually got on release, and I understand why people are mad about stuff like this. However, if you can put your anger aside for one moment and once again just take the time to think, it becomes clear why they changed it to the more simple layout we got. Imagine having to traverse this convoluted UI every time you wanted to hack anything. What we got instead was a much more functional system that is actually really fun to use more than just the first time. This gameplay demo and so many of the lies we heard from media and random Reddit threads expertly shows why I wanted to make this video. because this game is getting so much more hate and has gotten so much more hate than it deserves. And even more concerning, a large majority of that hate is from people that have no idea what they are talking about and are using sources that are completely fabricated. But that doesn't mean CD Projekt Red didn't mess up. This game was in a bad condition on release, especially on old-gen consoles, and how the management of CDPR handled selling a partially broken product to people is disgusting. But it wasn't like we were told. It just wasn't, and I'm tired of acting like it was so bad just so people won't get mad at me in the comments section. There were features that were shown or talked about before, like mantis blades crawling across walls or a personal garage, that didn't make it into the game. However, what you were never told about is the fact that CDPR did discuss these things being taken out of the game before release, and after have given thorough explanations as to why. For instance, crawling across Night City walls using mantis blades sounds amazing, right? And it looked awesome in that E3 demo. You know why it was taken out though? A developer came out a couple months back on a stream and mentioned why. It's because it didn't work with the complex geometry we saw all throughout Night City. They had to make a decision on whether it was either the buildings and scaffolding that needed to remain complex, or they could dumb those down and allow for more flat walls to run across. And honestly, I think they made the right choice. This is the most complex game world architecturally of all time, and keeping that was more important than hanging on walls sometimes, at least I think. Take something like the Life Pass as another example. CDPR from the early days of discussing this game mentioned that they would have multiple life paths to choose from that would change how we start the game and give us new dialogue options. The reason so many are mad about this today is because these life paths turned out to be nothing more than a 10 to 15 minute short intro of the game followed by a montage with Jackie. But here's the thing, I'm tired of acting like we deserved more. CD Projekt Red did not say these intros would take hours and hours. They did not lie. They told us exactly what we got in the game. Life paths that changed the intro, dialogue choices throughout the game based on that path, and that's what we were promised, and that is what we got. And I know a lot of people hearing this get mad because that isn't the issue. The issue is it ended up not being as cool as we thought. But that's just it. That's your problem, not the game's and not CDPR's. The real issue this game had was the media and fans' expectations weren't kept in check. People let their imaginations run wild and come up with what these life paths should be, and created an entire scenario in their heads that never existed in the first place. The media posted articles explaining how features like this would be revolutionary, when in reality, no developers or media at CDPR had actually said something even remotely similar. I've already shown you a variety of different pieces of evidence in this video, but go research for yourself too. A lot of what this game supposedly promised was never promised at all. Rather, it was a rampant amount of speculation and hype cycles from mainstream gaming media and, well, us. The Reddit threads, the YouTube videos, and the non-stop excitement got the better of everyone. The saddest of all is it resulted in lots of people hating on the game outside of the bugs as well. It's really popular nowadays to, for some reason, act like even without the bugs, this game isn't good. I'll just say it. That's a bunch of BS. This game has phenomenal writing, characters, set pieces, world building, and moments. And the more you get into it, the more it gives back. It's comical hearing some argue that this game isn't an RPG or that it has no heart. Those takes are about as disingenuous as it gets. Just because you don't like this game because of how other people told you to feel about it, doesn't mean it's not an RPG. The skill and perk systems, branching dialogue, decisions that matter later down the line for those that were paying attention, and multiple character builds. If that doesn't count as an RPG anymore, then we need to rename the entire genre. I know it's easy to hate. And don't get me wrong, CDPR does deserve a lot of the hate they got. Hiding gameplay on last generation systems before release is malicious at best and illegal at worst. And the higher-ups in management cannot be forgiven for lying in many ways just to make a little extra money, all while tarnishing their reputation. But I would be lying if I sat here and acted like this game wasn't magical in a lot of ways. It's sad to see the love put into this game from obviously talented developers go to waste because of our modern propensity to hate. It's a lesson that not only CD Projekt Red learned, but the industry as a whole. More games are being delayed now, not just because of a struggling world, but because of the fear that has enveloped the industry. The fear of being another Cyberpunk 2077. A game that may never lose the raincoat drenched in anger it wears, but one that beneath it all is housing something most games could only dream of having. Real heart, real passion, and something truly special. All I ask is that you ask yourself whether you hate this game because of your horrible experience or because of the experience of others. Did you nitpick every little thing because that was what you were supposed to do, or because that is what everyone else did? I've played games my entire life, and only a couple have made me fall in love with the medium, and only one has ever made me feel like this. Do yourself a favor and stop listening to what the world has to say about everything, and start trusting yourself to see through all the bullshit. The truth always lies somewhere in the middle, and I think in Cyberpunk's case, it's high time we finally got there.